Hey guys, tonight we begin with the smell of damp ash, a crusty apron, and the distant drone of monks chanting before sunrise. You're in a stone walled room that's colder than your ex's heart and about as cheerful as a dentist's office in Lent. Welcome to your new life. Cook for a 14th century monastery. You, yes, you, are the chosen guardian of the holy breakfast. You thought this job would involve spiritual peace and maybe the occasional loaf of blessed bread. What you got was smoke in your eyes, soot in your hair, and approximately zero sleep. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in pitch black. Not I should close the curtains dark. Not even midnight Netflix binge dark. This is monastic dark. It's somewhere between pre-dawn and why bother having eyes. You lie on a thin straw mat tucked into a communal sleeping room that smells faintly of damp wool, beeswax, and guilt. A bell tolls, the kind of slow, echoing ring that makes your soul sigh. That's your cue. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. Well, bed is generous. It's more like a pile of regrets, held together with itchy linen, and your feet land on freezing stone. Not cool stone, not refreshing stone. This stone has actively plotted against your toes all night. You dress in the dark because candles are a luxury, and no one wants to explain why you used up the week's supply before sunrise. You throw on your woolen habit, stained with 1,000 forgotten stews, and tug your belt tight. The cold slips into your sleeves like a judgmental snake. Outside your chamber, the monastery is silent but alive. Somewhere down the corridor, you hear shuffling robes and the unmistakable sound of someone clearing a throat in Latin. The monks are heading to matins, first prayers of the day, and you, blessed child of the kitchen, are heading in the opposite direction, to the kitchen. As you shuffle past the chapel, the flicker of oil lamps plays tricks on the walls. The air smells of incense, old wood, and something vaguely herbal, possibly Brother Anselm's foot ointment. You nod to a passing monk who may or may not be awake. He nods back with all the warmth of a winter turnip. You reach the kitchen door. It's a heavy oak beast with iron hinges that groans like it's been personally offended by your existence. You push it open with your shoulder and step into your realm. The hearth is stone cold. Literally. The ashes are dead and sulky, like a teenager on dish duty. Your first task is to bring it back to life, which means fire, which means fun. There are no matches, no lighters, no helpful button that says ignite. You kneel and fumble with flint and steel. Your fingers already numb. The sparks are stingy. They flirt with the kindling but refuse to commit. After what feels like an hour, and at least one muttered phrase you'll be confessing later, you get a tiny flicker. You baby it. You breathe on it like it's a birthday wish. And finally, it catches. The fire sputters to life, smoky and unenthusiastic. But it's there. You feed it bits of bark, old straw, a splintered chair leg from the pantry that's been accidentally repurposed. Warmth begins to bleed into the room, and with it, the smell of 100 meals long past. You stand, stretching your aching knees, and look around your domain. The stone walls are blackened with centuries of soot. The shelves are lined with ceramic jars, each labeled in a faded scrawl that might say barley or might say, "Please don't eat this." There's a stack of dented pans in the corner, one of which has been cursed since Brother Thomas tried to make cheese in it during a lightning storm. Historians still argue whether medieval kitchens were designed by practical minds or simply evolved through chaos and desperation. But yours is a bit of both, equal parts sanctuary and hazard. Your breath still clouds in the air. You start preparing the day's first meal. It's not glamorous. A pot of grain mash and a side of whatever root vegetable didn't rot last night. Breakfast for 40 monks must be ready before the second bell, and the only thing worse than a hungry monk is a sleepy one. As you chop a tired looking parsnip, you wonder, briefly, dangerously, what it might be like to sleep in, just once, to let someone else battle the fire and the frost. But that's fantasy. Monastic kitchens don't run on dreams. They run on elbows, onions, and abject humility, and maybe a little prayer. You mutter one under your breath, not for divine guidance, but that the porridge won't stick again, because if it does, you're scrubbing it off with a twig, a prayer, and half a lemon. And that's just the start of your day. You're still half asleep when the second bell tolls. This one echoes through the entire monastery with the passive aggressive clarity of a reminder you didn't need. You're standing over a simmering pot that smells like regret and turnips, trying to convince yourself that this counts as cooking. But there's no time to wallow. The brothers will be filing in from matins any minute now, ready for breakfast, and you've still got to prep the wooden bowls, stir the cauldron again, and pretend like you didn't just drop a whole onion into the fire. Before you do any of that, though, you sneak a glance at the small shelf near the hearth. There it sits, a tiny, hard, unyielding hunk of cheese you've been saving. It's technically for the prior, but you once licked it just to make it yours. That makes it a sacred object now, probably. You trudge toward the pantry for more barley. The pantry, by the way, is less a room and more a glorified closet with a single candle and the collective smell of ancient garlic. The door creaks open to reveal shelves lined with canvas sacks and ceramic pots. Some are labeled, some are mystery flavor. All of them are suspect. Your breath fogs again as you grab the barley sack and haul it back. It's heavier than expected, possibly full of barley, or mice, or the spirits of failed meals past. No one knows. You pour a scoop into the pot and stir with the sort of resigned dignity only a monk cook can muster. Then, just as you're getting into a rhythm, the real fun starts. The chanting arrives. The first monks appear at the edge of the refectory, hooded, expressionless, and moving like slow-moving shadows. You know these men well. You fed them through fasts, feasts, plagues, and that one terrible week someone tried to introduce lentil innovation. They slide into their wooden seats in silence. Talking isn't allowed during meals, which is ironic because the moment they sit down, every stomach in the room starts grumbling, like a Gregorian choir of hunger. You begin ladling porridge into bowls, one by one. It's more of a beige paste, really, but you try to keep the presentation polite. A nice swirl. Maybe a rogue herb leaf on top if you're feeling fancy. Which today, you are not. You stack bowls on a wooden tray and carry them out. One false move and it's porridge city on your sandals. The floor is uneven. You wobble, you catch yourself. You mutter a quick thanks to Saint Zita, patron of kitchen servants, and wonder if she really hears you or just laughs politely. One of the older monks raises an eyebrow as you serve him. You don't know if he's silently judging your portion size or just has resting monk face. Either way, you nod respectfully and shuffle back to the kitchen for round two. Back inside, the fire crackles louder now, as if mocking your efforts. You grab the next tray and realize your stomach is staging a protest of its own. You haven't eaten yet. You'll get whatever is left over, which, if history repeats itself, will be one spoon of porridge and the mysterious gray blob that keeps showing up when no one's looking. You sneak a glance out the narrow window. It's still dark, but hints of dawn are creeping in. The sky is a pale violet, the kind of color that would be romantic if you weren't currently elbow deep in monk gruel. You take a breath and return to the refectory, distributing food like a blessed lunch lady. Back at the kitchen, the cleanup begins, which of course means scrubbing the pot. The cauldron is vast and ancient, possibly forged by dragons, possibly just never properly cleaned. The inside is crusted with porridge that has achieved the density of medieval brick. You grab the scraper, a piece of wood that used to be a spoon, and begin chiseling like an archaeologist uncovering ruins. This is your life now. Holy residue in serial masonry. Historians still argue whether monastic cooks received extra rations or just extra chores. Either way, you definitely got the short end of the ladle. While the monks return to prayer, you stay behind with the dishes, the fire, and your own thoughts. You find a moment, just one, and sit on the stool by the hearth. Your hands are raw. Your eyes sting from smoke. Your soul aches for something warm and sweet, and not beige. You break a small piece from the crusty bread, saved from yesterday. It tastes like sawdust and obligation. Still, it's yours. A young novice peeks his head in. "Brother cook?" he whispers. You raise an eyebrow, mid-chew. The prior says we're expecting guests for dinner, possibly a bishop. You stop chewing. Guests means ceremony. Ceremony means 5 courses. 5 courses mean you'll be back here, long after the others are asleep, muttering at turnips like they're co-workers who never listen. You nod slowly, swallowing a lump of sourdough and existential dread. Tell the prior it will be simple but devout, which in kitchen code means hope you like barley in 5 forms. The novice nods and disappears, leaving behind the faint smell of candle wax and fear. You stare at the hearth, where the flames now dance merrily, unaware of your suffering. The pot bubbles lazily, like it has secrets. You have a long day ahead. The sun has barely risen, and you've already survived prayers, porridge, and perilous serving trays. And dinner? Dinner is going to be ambitious. You don't have time to panic, but you do it anyway, quietly, internally, with the practiced grace of someone who once had to serve turnip soup to an archbishop and watched him try not to gag in Latin. You glance at your supplies. A few onions. A string of garlic so old it might qualify as an artifact. Barley. Always barley. Dried peas, a lonely bunch of carrots, and one cabbage that looks like it's been through things. No meat today. It's Wednesday, which means fasting. And in monastic language, fasting roughly translates to hope you like boiled vegetables and spiritual reflection. You head for the woodpile, which, true to monastic budgeting, is half damp, half splinters, and half wishful thinking. You pick the driest logs you can find and throw them onto the fire, with the quiet desperation of a man who just remembered bishops usually travel with entourages. The hearth crackles, the pot steams. You fetch the iron pan, which you know from experience has 2 moods, blistering hot or judgingly cold. Today, of course, it chooses chaos. It spits at your hand as you toss in chopped onion. The smell hits instantly, sharp, earthy, slightly hopeful. You stir with a long wooden paddle. It's been whittled down over time and now resembles a giant popsicle stick of destiny. This is your wand, your sword, your protest sign against starvation. The onions hiss. You add some barley, a bit of broth from yesterday, and whisper a short prayer to St. Lawrence, patron of cooks, who famously got roasted alive and still made jokes. You respect that energy. A novice arrives to help. He's about 12, vaguely sticky, and always looks like he's mid crime. His name is Peter, but you mentally call him Disaster. He immediately knocks over the pot of peas. You both watch them roll across the floor like tiny green regrets. Sorry, he mumbles, trying to scoop them back with his sleeves. You sigh. Just don't touch anything else that moves or burns or contains liquid. Peter nods solemnly and sits in the corner with a piece of bread, as if punished by the gods of legumes. You get back to the pot. The barley's thickening nicely now. The carrots have gone from crunchy offense to edible hope. You toss in herbs from the wall hooks, thyme, sage, and something unlabeled that might be mint or dust. The trick to monastery cooking, you've learned, is not flavor, it's forgiveness. No one's expecting roast goose or wine reduction sauce. They're expecting food that won't send them to confession or the privy for 3 days. And if it fills the belly and warms the soul, you might even get a nod from the prior. Maybe. As the stew simmers, you prep bread dough. Again, you pour flour into the mixing trough. It's gritty and smells vaguely of attic. You add a splash of water, a sprinkle of salt, and start kneading. The dough resists. It's like wrestling a very dry badger. You push, you fold, you mutter a few curses that are technically in Latin, so you hope they don't count. The oven is a dome of stone and soot, tucked into the back corner like a grumpy old man who only wakes up for holy days and pastries. You stoke it with more logs and test the heat the old way, by sticking your arm in and judging how close you get to spiritual release. Hot enough. You shape the loaves, lumpy, honest things, and slide them into the oven with a long wooden paddle that's seen better centuries. The door shuts with a puff of ash, and you pray. Nothing explodes. Back to the pot. You taste the stew. It's fine, which is high praise in monastery circles. It doesn't taste like sadness. It tastes like continuity. Historians still argue whether monastery cooks had any formal recipes, or just winged it with divine assistance. Judging by today's creation, barley vegetable. Surprise, now with 40% fewer peas, it's probably the latter. Peter pipes up from the corner. Is this dinner? You look at him. Only if nothing else goes wrong, which of course means something will, because in every monastery kitchen, there is a law of nature. When you finally get ahead, something behind you falls over. Today, it's the salt crock. A low crack followed by a tragic whoosh. You turn to see the floor covered in a small blizzard of salt. Peter is already trying to scoop it back in. With his hands, you don't scream. That would be unmonastic. You just breathe. In, out, count to 10 in Gregorian chant. You scrape what you can into the waste bucket and whisper goodbye to sodium. The stew will be even blander than intended. Perhaps it's penance. Perhaps it's just life. The bell rings again. It's terse, the third prayer of the day. The monks will return to the chapel, leaving you time to prep lunch, start dinner, and clean everything twice. You wipe your hands on your apron and look around. The bread is baking. The stew is bubbling. The kitchen is filled with smoke, onions, and a faint sense of existential fatigue. You've been awake for 4 hours. It's not even mid morning. Welcome to the job. The bread is done, and you know because the scent hits your nose with the force of a holy vision. It's warm, crusty, and miracle of miracles, not burnt this time. You pull the loaves from the oven with hands wrapped in rags, and for one fleeting second, you feel like a wizard who just conjured joy out of flour. You place the loaves on a wooden rack by the window to cool. A breeze sneaks in, carrying with it the smell of wet grass, cow breath, and maybe a passing pilgrim. You'd complain, but it's a nice contrast to the usual kitchen bouquet of smoke, boiled peas, and Peter's mystery socks. Next, the cauldron needs stirring. Again, the stew is thickening into something you could possibly use as mortar. That's fine. The monks like it, hearty. It sticks to their ribs and slows their talking, which is convenient during silent meals. You glance over at Peter, who is poking the cooling bread loaves like they owe him money. Touch it again, you say, and you'll be fasting until Michaelmas. Peter nods, slowly removes his finger, and turns his attention to stirring the ash bucket. You don't ask why. As lunch nears, the brothers trickle back in from the scriptorium, the garden, and various corners of quiet holiness. Some are flushed from labor, others pale from copying manuscripts by candlelight. All of them look at the kitchen with a hope so solemn it feels like a benediction. You set up the table near the refectory door. Bowls, spoons, bread, more bowls. You arrange it all with a sort of rustic grace, trying to hide the fact that you chipped one of the spoons this morning while threatening a particularly stubborn turnip. And just as you place the first bowl, he arrives. Brother Cellarer, the monastery's version of a supply chain manager, part accountant, part food critic, part medieval, passive-aggressive menace. He has a face like an undercooked pancake and a nose that sniffs out mischief before it happens. He waddles into the kitchen like a goose with a clipboard and looks around. "What's this?" he says, gesturing at the pot. "Lunch," you say. He squints into it like it might attack him. "Looks thick." "Yes." "Smells better than yesterday." "Also yes." He picks up a spoon, tastes it, chews thoughtfully, and says, "Hmm." That's it. Just, "Hmm." And then he leaves, which is somehow worse than an insult. You turn back to your prep. The soup is portioned. The bread is sliced with a knife so dull it might as well be a spoon. Each monk will get one ladle of stew and a piece of bread roughly the size of his patience. As they enter one by one, the monks nod to you. Small, barely perceptible nods, but nods nonetheless. In monk speak, that's basically a standing ovation. You feel a tiny bloom of pride. The food might be simple, but it's made with care, and maybe a little spite, but mostly care. Once the food is served, you return to the kitchen and finally, serve yourself. You sit on the low bench by the hearth, cradle a bowl in your cold hands, and breathe in the steam. It's not gourmet. It's not even memorable, but it's hot. It's food, and it's yours. Halfway through your bowl, Peter reappears with a scrap of parchment. "The bishop is definitely coming," he says, "with 3 others." You stare at him. "When?" "Vespers." "Of course. The one meal that needs to be fancy, at the end of the longest day." You groan into your stew, not loudly, just enough to startle a nearby fly. Guests at a monastery are rare, and when they do arrive, there's a ritual. You pull out the nice bowls, the ones without cracks, the special plates that only get used when someone important visits or when Brother Thomas gets nostalgic and demands a feast for Saint Scholastica's birthday. You begin planning the dried apples from the cellar, the cheese wheels you've been saving, that one suspicious jar labeled fig paste that's been hiding behind the vinegar. You'll bake another round of bread, this time round loaves scored with crosses. You'll make a spiced broth with herbs that don't taste like dust. You'll boil eggs, if the hens cooperated this morning, and you'll need to find someone to churn butter quickly and preferably without involving Peter. Historians still argue whether monastic kitchens had a true head chef, but in this monastery, you are the culinary sovereign, and your kingdom is a small room filled with smoke, hope, and occasionally rodents. You roll up your sleeves, take a deep breath, and march back to the prep table. It's time to make dinner happen. The kind of dinner that says, we're humble, but also, please like us, Bishop. Peter looks up and says, should I peel something? You hand him a carrot and the bluntest knife you own. Try not to lose any fingers. And so begins the second act of your day. Dinner for the divine. You start with the onions. Always the onions. They're your first line of defense, your base layer, your aromatic armor. You slice through them with the efficiency of a man who no longer fears tears. Your eyes water, not from emotion, but from years of cumulative regret and sulfur compounds. Peter watches you, awestruck, as if you're performing alchemy. Next up, the broth. You drag the second largest cauldron off its hook, the guest pot. It's cleaner than the others because it gets used less and slightly less likely to cause food poisoning. You fill it with water from the well, pour in yesterday's leftover broth, and add a handful of dried herbs that still smell vaguely of life. You toss in the sliced onions, a few sad carrots, and the elusive fig paste. It plops into the pot with a wet sigh and begins to dissolve like a sugary ghost. You have no idea if it'll taste good. You just know it's fancy. And monks love the idea of sweet and savory, even if it ends up tasting like regret on toast. While the pot simmers, you go forage through the dry stores, tucked behind sacks of flour and ominous jars of pickled vegetable matter. You find a true treasure, a tiny bag of chickpeas. You hold it up like the Holy Grail. Protein, texture, the illusion of wealth. Tonight, Bishop, you dine like a Benedictine. Peter is still peeling carrots. He's somehow made less progress than the carrot. You take the knife and finish the job yourself, silently promising to put him on dish duty for a month. He won't survive, but it'll build character. The bread oven is still warm from the morning. You slide in the new loaves, small rounds dusted with flour and crossed with a sharp knife. The cuts help the bread bake evenly, but in your heart you also think they ward off judgmental ecclesiastical stares. Next, cheese. You lift a wheel from the pantry shelf, brush off the mold, and cut it into wedges. It's hard cheese, aged, salty, and slightly waxy, perfect for slicing thin and pretending it's more than it is. You arrange it on a wooden board, add a sprig of thyme for appearance, and place it reverently on the sideboard. Then comes the real moment of anxiety, the eggs. You gather a small basket and head out to the henhouse. The afternoon air is crisp, filled with the scent of hay, manure, and mild poultry resentment. The hens cluck indignantly as you reach beneath them, plucking out what few eggs they've bothered to produce. 7. Not bad. You boil them in a smaller pot over the side fire. The water bubbles up furiously, sending bits of hay floating to the surface. You glance at Peter. If you tell anyone I didn't wash these first, I'll put you on onion duty forever. He nods solemnly, like a tiny monk with big secrets. Back in the kitchen, the dinner components begin to take shape. The broth is bubbling into something rich and golden. The chickpeas are softening. The bread smells divine. Even the carrots, now roasted in a pan with oil and a bit of vinegar, look like something you'd proudly serve a minor saint. Historians still debate whether monastery meals for guests were truly better or just better plated. But you're not here to argue with parchment scholars. You're here to survive the bishop's visit with your dignity and kneecaps intact. And right on cue, the bell tolls again. Vespers. You wipe your hands on your apron, splash your face with well water, and give the kitchen a final glance. Smoke curls from the hearth like a lazy spirit. Bread is stacked, bowls are lined up, cheese is sliced, eggs are peeled and halved. Everything's ready, or as ready as it'll ever be. The prior enters first, followed by the bishop and his three very hungry companions. Team. The bishop is tall, draped in fabric that's far too luxurious for a fasting day, and wearing the expression of a man who expects soup but is hoping for pheasant. You nod deeply. Not too deep. You're not a servant, but you are definitely not a peer. The prior makes the introductions. Our brother cook has prepared a humble but nourishing meal. You suppress the urge to correct him with, our brother cook has performed a miracle using only legumes and trauma. The guests sit. The monks file in silently, heads bowed, hands folded. The refectory feels colder today, the air heavier. You serve the soup first, ladling it carefully, so each bowl gets equal amounts of broth, chickpeas, and one ceremonious carrot slice. Next comes the bread, then the cheese, then the eggs. You arrange the plates with the solemnity of a man laying offerings at an altar. The bishop dips his spoon. He tastes, he chews, he nods. Not a big nod, not a glowing Yelp review, but a real, actual nod. You try not to collapse. Peter grins at you from the corner. He's holding a tray of cups. Water, of course. No wine in this kitchen. You nod at him and hope he doesn't spill anything on the bishop's lap. Again. You retreat to the kitchen while they eat, and finally sit. Your back cracks. Your knees hum like bees. Your eyes feel like they've been scoured with onion brine. But still, there's satisfaction. Quiet, breadcrumb-strewn satisfaction. Because somehow, with smoke, soup, and a suspicious fig paste, you pulled off a dinner worthy of a bishop. You lean back, close your eyes for just a moment. Then Peter appears. We're out of barley, he says. Of course. You blink at Peter. What do you mean we're out of barley? He fidgets. I mean the sack is empty. You stare at the pantry door like it personally betrayed you. Barley is the cornerstone of your culinary identity. It's your pasta, your rice, your cake, your crisis management tool. Without barley, you are not a cook. You are a warm body in a smoky room slowly losing grip on reality. You stand, creaking like a medieval floorboard, and march to the pantry. Sure enough, the barley sack lies slumped in the corner, deflated. You shake it anyway, as if this might somehow conjure more. 2 grains fall out, like tears. Peter watches with big eyes. Can we use millet? You pause. Technically, yes. Realistically, it tastes like a punishment. Only if we want everyone to think we're in trouble with Rome. But necessity is the mother of questionable innovation. So you grab the millet. It's dusty, bitter, and cooks like birdseed. But it's food. Sort of. You dump it into a smaller sack for soaking because millet has opinions and needs time to consider cooperating. As it sits, you poke around the stores again, hoping for anything forgotten. Lentils, a miracle, Saint Zita's secret stash. What you find is a tiny cloth pouch, tied tightly, unlabeled, and suspiciously hidden behind a sack of dried leeks. You open it. Inside are three shriveled raisins and a single clove. You hold the clove up like a relic, a spice, an honest to goodness spice. In this monastery, spices are rarer than enthusiasm. They're locked up tighter than the wine cellar and usually reserved for feast days or people about to meet their maker. You glance around. No one saw, not even Peter. You pocket the clove like a sinner and whisper, "Not today, Lent, not today." By mid morning, you're elbows deep in millet porridge. It smells like beige and tastes like penance, but you add a bit of onion broth to coax out some flavor. Maybe no one will notice. Maybe everyone will just think they've sinned and move on. Then comes the bread crisis. You pull the morning loaves from the rack to find that half have collapsed inward like tiny, deflated domes. One has split at the side, gaping like a medieval yawn. You know immediately what happened. The oven was too hot. Again. You eye Peter. He says nothing. Wise. You salvage what you can, cutting the loaves into quarters and buttering them with yesterday's churned batch, which has taken on a texture best described as gritty optimism. Meanwhile, the monastery cat wanders in. She's old, lopsided, and smells faintly of fish stew. You call her Sister Ursula, though no one else does. She hops onto the table and immediately licks one of the failed loaves. You sigh and hand it to her. Fine, you win this one. Sister Ursula purrs and leaves with her prize. As the brothers shuffle in for lunch, you serve the millet like it's the most natural thing in the world. You add a few leaves of wilted parsley on top, purely for optics. One monk raises an eyebrow. Another silently sniffs it. A third eats quickly, as if swallowing regret before it fully registers. Historians still argue whether monks complained about food or simply internalized it as suffering. Judging by today's dining room silence, deeper and more strained than usual, you're leaning toward silent judgment. After the meal, Brother Celery returns. His robes are dusted with flour, which feels threatening. He inspects the loaves, frowns at the millet, and says, "Creative." You nod. Inspired by scarcity. He wanders off again, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs and unresolved feelings. You slump onto your stool and stare into the fire. The hearth is low, the coals glowing. Like tired eyes, you feed in a few more sticks and listen to the slow crackle. It's oddly comforting, like a friend who only communicates in static. Then Peter ruins it. "Brother Cook," he says, "someone dropped the honey jar." You don't move. They dropped it in the hallway, then stepped in it. You inhale deeply. How much honey? Most. You sigh. Not the melodramatic kind, the "my soul is leaking" kind. You grab the mop, which is actually a rag tied to a stick, and trudge to the hallway. There, in all its golden, sticky tragedy, is the honey smear. It stretches nearly 5 feet and glistens in the sunlight like a medieval crime scene. You kneel, you mop. The rag sticks. You mop harder. Peter hovers nearby, trying to look helpful. "Should we just spread sawdust?" You look at him. "And then what? Serve it as dessert?" He backs away wisely. Cleaning takes half an hour, 3 curse-adjacent phrases, and a chunk of your will to live. By the end, your knees are gummy, and your hands smell like fermented bees. Back in the kitchen, you wash the rag in a bucket of gray water and count your remaining spoons. 6. There were 9 this morning. You don't ask. You scrape the pot clean and prep for vespers. Another meal, another millet surprise. You spice it with garlic and the tiniest shaving of that secret clove. Just enough to make someone go, "Huh?" and wonder if divine grace can be tasted. You pour yourself a cup of boiled water, sit down by the door, and rest your head against the stone wall. Outside, the wind rustles the ivy. Inside, the fire crackles. Sister Ursula snores, and Peter is trying to balance a ladle on his nose. You close your eyes and think, it's not glamorous. It's not comfortable, but it's real. And tomorrow, it all starts again. The clove. You can still smell it on your hands. Just a pinch shaved into the millet last night. Less than a whisper, really. And Brother Gregory claimed to have a culinary revelation mid-bite. He spent the rest of the evening asking whether God had visited the porridge. You nodded politely and said nothing about the secret stash behind the pickled leeks. This morning, you wake earlier than usual, not from bells, but from the cold. The kind of cold that creeps into your spine and sets up a long-term lease. You crack open the kitchen door, and the air bites your cheeks. Outside, frost clings to the cloister stones like sugar on a stale bread. You take one look at the sky, gray, moody, ominous, and you just know it's going to be one of those days. You shuffle in, rub your hands together, and face the hearth. Cold again. Of course. Always cold when your bones ache the most. You kneel, stack some damp wood, and start the fire dance. Flint, spark, breath, whisper, beg. It lights on the fifth try after a small cloud of curses and a bark chipped to the eye. A promising start. As the fire grows, so does the kitchen's familiar smell. Ash, yesterday's onions, and a lingering whiff of maybe cheese. You start on the breakfast pot, reaching for the barley, and remember, no barley. The millet greets you like a smug ex. You grab the sack, grumble under your breath, and dump it into water to soak. At least the soaking will buy you a few precious minutes to consider your life choices and stare dramatically into the fire. Peter arrives, already out of breath. He's holding a tiny piece of paper. Not parchment, paper, the fancy stuff. You squint. Where did you get that? A merchant passed through, left this at the gate. He hands it to you. It reads, "To the kitchen. Brother, thank you for the hospitality and for the fig broth. I have not tasted such boldness since Avignon." It's signed, Celius. You stare at the signature, Bishop Elias. He liked the broth. He really liked the broth. You allow yourself a small smile, then promptly trip over a bucket of turnips. The monks file in for morning prayers and breakfast. You ladle out steaming bowls of, let's call it millet medley. They eat in silence, as always, but a few chew more slowly than usual. One even makes eye contact. That's monk for not bad. You head back to the kitchen and begin cleaning. The pot is caked in millet crusts. The spoons are covered in spiritual residue. You scrub with a rag and something vaguely soap-like. The water is cold enough to test your faith. Then Brother Cellerer walks in. Again, he holds a scroll. Never a good sign. We've been asked to host a group of visiting pilgrims tomorrow, he says, voice flat as unleavened bread. They'll need supper, possibly breakfast. There are 11. You blink. 11? He nods. And they're from Burgundy. You stare at him. Burgundy has wine, and bread, and decent taste. He shrugs. So we must do our best. And with that, he's gone, leaving behind the scent of musty wool and bureaucratic doom. You slump onto the stool. 11 guests, no barley, 2 onions, 1 Peter. You start planning. Bread, definitely. That means you'll need to start dough now. You measure out the flour, what's left of it. You add water, salt, and just a dash of hope. You knead and knead and knead until the dough finally feels like something resembling ambition. Peter appears with the egg basket. 2 eggs today, he says brightly. Don't drop them. He drops one. The other, you place gently into a clay bowl. You'll save it for something sacred, or breakfast for yourself, whichever comes first. The dough rests, the fire hums. You glance at the spice shelf and feel a tiny thrill of rebellion. The saffron is locked, of course, guarded like it's the crown jewels. But there's a smaller jar behind it, one with a faintly faded label and something yellow inside. You lift the lid. Turmeric. Or maybe powdered mustard. Hard to say. You sniff. It clears your sinuses, your conscience, and possibly the top layer of your skin. Historians still debate whether monastic cooks truly understood spices or simply tossed things in and hoped for sanctification. You, in this moment, are definitely the latter. You pinch a little into the bread dough, just for color, just for spirit. Peter says, "Is that legal?" You say, "Probably not." He nods in awe. You prep a stew for tonight, using the last of the dried beans, a sad turnip, and that one carrot that somehow escaped yesterday's knife. You add a few garlic cloves and stir slowly, watching it come together like a spell being cast in real time. Lunch passes uneventfully. No collapses, no complaints. Even Sister Ursula shows up for a sniff and a meow. You give her a crust. She purrs, then promptly sits on your best towel. Typical. Evening comes. You kneel beside the oven, slide in the turmeric bread, and wait. The kitchen fills with a warm, spicy scent. The loaves puff slightly, crack open at the top. Golden, glowing, like edible sunlight. You pull them out just as the bell rings for vespers. You slice the bread, place it beside the humble stew, and serve. The monks eat quietly. The pilgrims haven't arrived yet, but this meal is calm. No surprises, no disasters. Just hot food, warm bread, and one perfect egg still waiting in the bowl. You sit, alone now, watching the coals dim to orange. Your hands smell of smoke and dough. Your mind, for once, is still. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, the real circus begins. You wake with a start, the kind of jolt that tells you two things immediately. One, you fell asleep in the kitchen again, and two, something is very, very wrong. It's quiet, too quiet. Then it hits you. The pilgrims. They're arriving this morning. You scramble to your feet, joints cracking like firewood, and glance at the hearth. Cold again, naturally. The coals sulk in the ash like they're holding a grudge. You don't have time for their moodiness, so you jam in fresh wood and spark the flint with more urgency than grace. It catches on the third try, which is basically divine intervention. The millet's soaking from last night, again, and you're already out of carrots. You make a mental list of what's left. 2 onions, half a sack of dried peas, a wedge of cheese hardened to the consistency of medieval armor, and the one sacred egg. That egg is still there, untouched, a beacon of restraint. You nod at it like a fellow soldier. Peter shows up, hair sticking up like he combed it with a fork. "They're here," he says. You blink. "Already?" He nods, wide-eyed. "And one of them has a hat. Like, with feathers." Feathers. You sigh. Of course. Fancy hats always mean complicated diets. You hurry out to the courtyard for a peek. Sure enough, 11 pilgrims in various states of mud and splendor are standing near the chapel. Their robes are travel-worn, their boots cracked, and one is holding a small lute. You immediately dislike him. Back in the kitchen, you go into triage mode. You boil the peas. You grate the cheese into flakes and pretend it's garnish. You pull out the last of the flatbread from 2 days ago and toast it on the pan with a little oil and thyme. It hisses angrily, but it's something. Peter offers to help. You hand him the whisk and ask him to stir the egg slowly, gently, reverently. You're not even using it yet, but you figure it'll keep him occupied and out of harm's way. Then it's time to think big. You fetch the apple rings from storage, dried months ago, saved for emergencies. This qualifies. You soak them in warm water with a bit of honey scraped from the last jar. The result is a sticky, fragrant mess that somehow smells like optimism. Next, the broth. You throw everything you've got into it: peas, onions, the mystery greens from the cloister garden that you hope aren't poisonous. You season it with salt and whatever that dusty yellow powder is, turmeric, you've decided, and let it simmer until the room smells like someone tried to make soup and stumbled upon meaning. Historians still argue whether pilgrims expected luxury or humility when dining in monasteries. Judging by the hat, you're going with bare minimum, but pretend it's a gift. By mid morning, the kitchen is buzzing. The monks are setting up the guest table in the refectory: white cloth, polished cups, candles. You supervise from the door, arms crossed, holding a ladle like a scepter. And then, catastrophe. Peter drops the egg. You don't hear it crack. You feel it. There's a stillness. You turn. You lock eyes with the bowl, now empty. Peter is frozen, mouth open, holding his hands like he's trying to rewind time. You walk over. Slowly. Silently. He points. It slipped. You nod. Then say very calmly, "Go. Wash the spoons." "All of them?" "All of them. There are 47. He scurries off in shame, and you kneel to mourn the egg. It had a good run, a noble life. You scrape what you can into the ash bucket and move on, a little sadder, a little stronger. Lunch service begins. The pilgrims file in, led by Brother Cellerer, who looks uncharacteristically proud. He gestures broadly toward the bowls, the bread, the stew. You stand at the ready, apron, cleanish, ladle in hand. They taste. They chew. The man with the hat says, "You nearly faint." Another nods. One even sips the broth and makes a noise that might be satisfaction, or just digestion. Either way, you'll take it. Peter returns, soaking wet and holding a spoon like it's a holy relic. You give him the smallest smile and he beams. After the meal, one of the pilgrims approaches you directly. He's the loot guy. You brace for criticism, but instead he says, "Your soup. It reminds me of home." You nod, unsure what that means, but grateful. He hands you something, a pouch. You open it to find 2 cloves, real cloves, whole, fragrant, perfect. You look up. "Are you sure?" He smiles. "For the cook. Every journey needs magic." You bow, not low, but just enough to say thank you in kitchen language. As the pilgrims depart, the monks return to their usual pace. You finally sit, bread in hand, and let the heat from the hearth soak into your bones. 2 cloves. Richer, 1 egg poorer. Soul completely wrung out. You close your eyes and let the moment last just a little longer. You wake the next morning with a familiar ache in your shoulders and something new, the faint smell of cloves, still hanging in the kitchen, air like a secret. The pouch sits tucked into the folds of your apron, and you pat it like a lucky charm. 2 whole cloves. Not stolen, not begged, actually given. You allow yourself one smile. Half a smile, really. No need to attract divine suspicion. Today is quiet, on paper anyway. No guests, no bishops, just the usual 40 or so monks, and your increasingly fragile pantry. The millet is gone. The barley is still gone. The peas are sulking in their jar. You eye the sack of lentils with reluctant affection. They've waited patiently, those lentils. Time to give them their moment. You pour a generous handful into a pot, add water, and begin the long simmering process. Lentils have no ego. They don't pretend to be fancy. They just absorb whatever they're given, like monks but less opinionated. Peter appears holding a wooden bowl. I found mushrooms. You freeze. Where? In the garden. You sure they're edible? He shrugs. I saw a squirrel eat one. You stare at the mushrooms, then the boy. Get Brother Thaddeus. Why? Because if he smells them and doesn't faint, we'll use them. Brother Thaddeus, your resident herbalist and reluctant poison expert, arrives a few minutes later. He sniffs, pokes, squints, and finally declares, technically not fatal. You take that as a glowing review. The mushrooms go into the pot with the lentils, joining a handful of leeks and a splash of yesterday's broth. You add a pinch of salt, a scrap of thyme, and just a whisper of clove. Not the whole one, just a shaving. As the stew simmers, you prepare bread. Again, there's always bread. You've come to realize it's not so much a food as a monastic identity. You measure the flour, barely enough. Water, slightly cloudy, but not moving. You knead with steady hands, letting the rhythm take over. Push, fold, turn. It's like prayer, but sweatier. Historians still debate how much autonomy monastery cooks had. Were you a lowly servant or a crucial gear in the great spiritual machine? You don't have time for academic debates. You're too busy battling yeast. The dough rises slowly by the hearth, swaddled in a cloth and surrounded by quiet expectation. Meanwhile, you start prepping for tomorrow's fast day. Fridays are always fish days, if you're lucky, or turnip days if the river hates you. You head out to the small pond behind the monastery, a marshy puddle with ambitions. You carry a net and a bucket, hoping for anything with gills. The wind bites your cheeks as you crouch by the water, scanning the surface for movement. 10 minutes later, nothing. 20 minutes, a frog. 30 minutes, wet socks, low morale, and one very surprised eel. You don't particularly want the eel. It's long, angry, and smells like damp eternity. But protein is protein. You plop it into the bucket and trudge back. Peter meets you at the door. What is that? Dinner, you say. He makes a face like he just bit a lemon with feelings. Back in the kitchen, you inspect your catch. The eel glares at you. You glare back. There's a mutual understanding. One of you is going to win, and it's not going to be the slippery one with no arms. Cleaning an eel is not elegant work. It's not spiritual. It's barely legal. But eventually, you get it prepped, chopped, and tucked into a stew pot with onion, garlic, and a squeeze of lemon juice. Brother Thaddeus, borrowed from the apothecary. You check the bread, golden, puffy, miraculous. You pull the loaves from the oven and let them cool on the rack, their crusts crackling as they settle. The scent fills the room, yeast, heat, maybe just a hint of clove from the air. It smells like survival. Dinner service is blessedly uneventful. The monks eat quietly, slowly. A few glance down at their bowls with curiosity. One even mutters, before catching himself and crossing his chest. You serve the eel stew with flatbread, say a silent prayer for everyone's digestion, and retreat back to your stool as the room empties. Sister Ursula arrives and curls up near your feet. You toss her a breadcrumb. She sniffs it, yawns, and immediately falls asleep. Her faith in you is either very deep or entirely indifferent. The fire burns low. The dishes are done. Peter hums quietly as he dries the spoons, occasionally dropping one and pretending it didn't happen. You sit back, close your eyes, and breathe. Today was quiet, but not easy. Tomorrow, there will be more fires, more bread, and probably more eel. But for now, there's stillness. And somewhere in your apron, 1.5 cloves of something magical. You wake up before the bells, not by choice. Your knees have their own internal alarm clock now, apparently set to cold and damp. You groan, stretch, and sit upright on your straw mattress with the grace of an overturned cart. The room is dark, the air sharper than usual, and there's a faint scent of rain? No, not quite. Smoke. You bolt upright. It's not a fire, it's just the hearth, smoking like it's trying to win a competition. You forgot to clean the chimney flue last week, or last month. Time blurs when your life is built around turnips and the passage of liturgical hours. You trudge to the kitchen, your robe wrapped tight against the chill, and wave smoke out the window with a wooden plate. The dawn light peeks through, revealing yesterday's soot and the haunting silhouette of Sister Ursula licking last night's eel bowl. Good morning to you, too, you mutter, patting her gently as she purrs and exits like royalty. You reignite the fire, less dramatic today, and set about boiling water. Today is Friday, fish day, fast day, flavor optional day. You stare into the pantry like a gambler sizing up dice. No barley, no millet, no peas, no lentils. You are now officially operating on hope, half a leek, and one desperate eel bone. You do a quick mental inventory of what's left. 3 sad onions, a bowl of dried nettles, some stale rye bread, and, heaven bless it, a scoop of old porridge crust. You sigh. It'll have to be broth again. Eel bone and onion broth with nettle garnish. Soothing, subtle, possibly questionable. Peter enters, face red from the wind, holding a bucket. What's that? You ask, wary. He beams. Oyster mushrooms. Brother Thaddeus said they're real. From the old tree stump. You peer in? Indeed. Plump, frilly edged, and shockingly clean. No beetles, no slugs, no curses. You nod. Today, you're promoted to assistant mushroom boy. Peter glows with pride. Can I make a hat? You stare. No. You chop the mushrooms while the broth simmers, throwing them into the pot with reverence. They float for a while, like little gray boats on a holy sea. You stir slowly, adding salt and thyme and a few nettles for that medicinal kick monks claim to enjoy. Then you remember the bread. The leftover rye loaves are rock hard, nearly fossilized, but you slice them thin, drizzle with oil, and toast them over the hearth. The result? Crispy, golden crackers that crack just slightly less than your own knees. Historians still argue whether monastic meals on fasting days were truly spiritual or just flavorless. You suspect both. There's something mystical about eating food that tastes like silence. By midday, the monks begin trickling in. Some look groggy from morning prayers. Others look hungry. In that way, only monks do. Calmly, quietly, with passive-aggressive stomachs. You serve the broth with a splash of olive oil and exactly one floating mushroom per bowl. It's aesthetic, minimalist, wholly chic. The toasted rye crisps are handed out with all the solemnity of communion wafers. A few brothers nod. One mutters, You suspect that's the highest praise you'll get all week. After lunch, you begin cleaning. The pot, the bowls, the floor, and, because the chimney finally got its revenge, the walls. Smoke leaves a trail, not just on stone, but in your lungs, your hair, and your attitude. As you scrub, Brother Cellarer enters with a sheepish look and a folded parchment. Oh no, you say. Don't even read it. I already know. He pauses. But it's important. Fine, you sigh. How many? How soon? He clears his throat. Tomorrow night. Feast of Saint Benedict. 30 guests. You blink. 30? He nods. including Prior Julian of Normandy. You slump onto the nearest bench, which creaks under the weight of your disbelief. Saint Benedict's feast is supposed to be simple, modest, devout, but not when there are guests. Then it becomes a spectacle. Tables with actual tablecloths, cheese, wine if the cellar hasn't dried up, and food. Real food, not broth, not sadness. Actual food. You whisper, "Do we have chicken?" Brother Cellarer frowns. "We have chickens." "Alive?" "Yes." "Well," you mutter, "not for long." You mentally begin drafting the menu. Chickens. Roasted, assuming they cooperate. Bread. Soft, fresh, not the brick variety. Stew. Something with beans. If you can barter some from Brother George. Pudding. If you can find eggs and sugar and a will to live. You don't even notice Peter standing in the corner, holding a broom like a sword. "Should I get the chickens?" he asks. You glance at him. "No, you'd get emotionally attached." He nods. He would. That night, after cleaning and prep and minor internal weeping, you sit by the fire with a bowl of leftover broth and a heel of toasted rye. The kitchen is still, quiet. The hearth glows orange. The pot simmers softly. You're tired, bone deep tired. But in your pocket is a scrap of paper, a menu plan, scribbled in haste, ink smudged. At the top, feast for Saint Benedict. Do not panic. You stare at it, then toss it into the fire. Tomorrow, you'll write a better one. Tonight, you rest. The rooster crows, which is funny because by this point, the rooster works for you. He wakes when you wake, or rather, when Peter wakes him, accidentally every morning by tripping over the firewood stack on his way to the kitchen. Today is the feast of Saint Benedict, a big deal. The kind of day that puts a twinkle in the prior's eye and panic in your pancreas. You've got one shot to feed 30 monks and honored guests without causing digestive distress or ecclesiastical gossip. You light the fire and immediately throw on a pot of water for tea, blessedly simple, and start hauling out ingredients. Last night, after a full 2 hours of negotiating with Brother George, who has more beans than any man should, you secured a sack of fava beans, 5 wrinkly apples, 3 chickens, now ex-chickens, 2 eggs, praise be, and, the real miracle, a pouch of dried figs. Also, Peter found a half-full jug of wine behind the altar. You decide not to ask how. First, the bread. You mix 2 batches of dough, one for simple loaves and one sweetened with honey and apple slices. You knead with determination, if not joy. The dough fights back like a spoiled child, but eventually settles into a pliable lump of future goodness. You leave it to rise by the hearth and move on to the beans. You soak them quickly, cheat soaking, as you call it, because there is no time for purity today. Into the pot they go, with garlic, onion, a sprig of rosemary, and the secret weapon, a tiny shaving of clove. While the stew simmers, you prepare the birds. The chickens lie on the prep table like they're about to confess their sins. You rub them with oil, salt, herbs, and just the faintest whisper of wine. Not too much. You're not running a tavern. Peter helps, wide-eyed and silent. He's never seasoned a dead thing before. You hand him a sprig of thyme and tell him it's just like baptizing something aggressively. You tuck the chickens into the oven, your grandest dish of the day, and whisper a small prayer to St. Lawrence, martyr and spiritual patron of anyone who's ever been roasted by life. Historians still argue whether monastic feasts were truly celebratory or more performative exercises in piety. You don't know. You just know it's the only day of the month you're allowed to use 2 spices in the same dish. The fava stew bubbles, the chickens roast, the bread begins to rise into beautiful golden humps, and in the corner, Peter is gently folding napkins as if preparing for the Pope. You glance at the clock. Vespers is still hours away, but things need to be timed with surgical precision. You chop apples, mix them with honey, and fold them into a basic batter with the 2 eggs and just enough flour to pretend it's dessert. You pour it into a clay baking dish and slide it into the coals beside the chickens. If all goes well, it'll taste like joy. If not, it'll taste like hot sadness with a crunch. You're wiping your hands when Brother Cellarer enters again. You brace? 32 now, he says, completely without remorse. 2 extra guests. You breathe. Slowly. Do we still have the figs? He checks the counter. You had figs? You hide the pouch behind your back. No. Peter snorts. You hush him with a glance. Dinner prep continues. You set up 3 serving tables with linen cloths that haven't been white since Charlemagne. You arrange the bread, the wine, the bean stew, and the chickens once they're fully golden, tender, and not suspiciously undercooked. The fig surprise, you now decide, will be presented sliced thin and arranged with the apple cake, because appearances. That's what guests remember. Not taste, not texture, just whether it looked like you tried. As the first bell rings, you line everything up. And for the first time all week, you're ready early. The monks file in, robes swishing, heads bowed. The guests follow. Prior Julian of Normandy and his entourage. One has a cane made of bone. Another smells like a perfumery exploded. They sit, you serve. The stew is first. Rich, thick, hearty, with just a ghost of clove and rosemary. They eat in silence, the holy kind. Next, the bread. Crusty on the outside, soft inside. A loaf passes hands like a blessed artifact. Then the chickens. Tender, golden, steaming. A few eyes widen. One guest actually smiles. That's more than you've gotten from the prior all year. And finally, dessert. The apple honey pudding with fig garnish. It's simple, rustic, a little cracked on top, but warm, real. The meal ends without incident. No food poisoning, no dramatic choking, just satisfied silence and one muttered, "Thank you," from Prior Julian himself. You sit down after, utterly spent. Your robe smells of rosemary and roasted bird. Your hands ache. Your back is officially 70 years old. Peter sits beside you, eating the last heel of sweet bread with reverence. You think it was good? He asks. You nod. Good enough to make Benedict proud, or at least sleepy. And with that, the feast ends. Tomorrow it's back to nettles. But tonight, you rest in glory. Morning comes like a bad joke. Early, cold, and slightly damp. You wake up with breadcrumbs in your hair and the lingering aroma of yesterday's feast still clinging to your tunic, like pride or shame. Hard to tell. The kitchen looks like the aftermath of a medieval wedding, minus the dancing and emotional trauma. You shuffle in, rubbing your eyes, and behold the battlefield. Grease spots on the stone floor, pots stacked like architectural experiments, one ladle inexplicably stuck to the ceiling beam, and Peter curled under the prep table, using a sack of flour as a pillow. He snores like a modest storm cloud. You let him sleep, for now. First things first, boil water, always. The act of heating water, of turning something plain into something slightly less plain, feels like reclaiming control. You clean the hearth, stack the wood, Light the fire with fingers that still smell of clove and chicken fat, and begin the great daily ritual of what's still edible. You rummage through the pantry. The feast has taken its toll. The barley sack is still empty, the millet sack is somehow negative millet, and the lentils have been replaced by a note from Brother George, reading, I will trade more for 3 apples and a secret. You have 1 apple, and no more secrets you're willing to part with. You settle on cabbage, not because it's good, but because it's loyal. It sits there in its waxy green silence, asking nothing, offering only vague nutritional value and a smell that clears rooms. You chop it, slowly, with a knife that desperately needs sharpening, but sharpening stones are now locked in the tool room after Peter tried to use one as a cheese grater. Into the pot goes the cabbage, along with some dried onions and yesterday's fava bean remnants. You add water, salt, and your last pinch of spice. Not clove this time, but a little dried sage you found tucked behind the vinegar. Historians still argue about sage's role in medieval diets. Was it flavor, medicine, or accidental shrubbery? Today, for you, it is simply hope with a smell. As the stew simmers, Peter stirs and emerges from his flower cocoon. I dreamed I was a monk, he says. You are a monk, you reply. Oh, he says. Then I dreamed I had a bed. You pass him a wooden cup of warm water and a stale heel of bread, which he accepts like a sacrament. By noon, the cabbage stew is ready. It smells efficient. The monks trickle in one by one, looking dazed from post-feast reflection. No one expects much today, which is good because they're not getting much. You serve silently, 1 ladle each, a slice of bread, a glance that says, we had chicken once, never again. Brother Celerer appears as the last bowl is served. He doesn't say anything, just stands there, eyes scanning, calculating. He sniffs, he nods, then walks out. You're unsure if that was approval or a silent warning. After lunch, you begin cleaning. Again, always again. Peter scrubs pots while humming a hymn that's definitely off key. Sister Ursula makes an appearance and tries to eat a breadcrumb that may or may not be older than she is. You wipe the table, sweep the ash, and try not to think about the fact that it's only Wednesday. Then the bell rings, not the mealtime bell, the message bell, which only rings when something unpleasant is about to enter your life. Brother Thaddeus enters, scroll in hand, face unreadable. He hands it to you like it's a dead squirrel. You open it. To the Monastery of Saint Simplicius. Be it known that a group of 8 travelers will seek shelter and nourishment tomorrow midday. They are merchants of repute, traveling under papal protection. Kindly prepare accordingly. You read it twice, then out loud, then throw it onto the fire. Because you believe in dramatic flair. Peter is already at your side, wide-eyed. We're feeding merchants? Yes. Like people with expectations? Exactly. You begin planning, again, like always. Tomorrow must feel different. You need something impressive, but you have cabbage, and bread, and Peter. That's it. Then you remember the apple, the 1 apple. You pluck it from the shelf, wrinkled, bruised, possibly sentient, but still good enough to sweeten a broth. Or better yet, bake. You've never tried an apple cake with only 1 apple, but miracles happen. You also find a wedge of goat cheese wrapped in waxed cloth. Forgotten. Sharp. A little sour. You sniff it and whisper, you'll do. Peter looks hopeful. What about the clove? You shake your head. Not yet. We're saving that. Saving it for what? But for the day we truly need magic. He nods solemnly. like Easter or tax season. That night, you make a small test batch of what you will pretend is a tart. Apple slices layered on a flat slab of sweetened bread dough, topped with a smear of cheese and a drizzle of honey left over from the feast. It smells divine. You eat it with Peter by the fire, and it tastes not holy, but hopeful. And in a monastery kitchen in 1300, that's more than enough. The morning starts with a surprise rain. Not the polite, misty kind that drapes the cloisters in poetic melancholy. No, this is full bodied, sky falling, bucket thumping rain, the kind that slaps you awake before your feet even touch the floor. You sit up on your straw mattress to the unmistakable sound of water dripping somewhere very much inside the building. You sigh. That leak over the kitchen beam is back. You wrap yourself in your cloak, now twice as damp as it was last week, and shuffle to the kitchen with a groan and a prayer. The hearth is, of course, dead. Sister Ursula is curled under the woodpile, dry and smug. You give her a crust and start building the fire, coaxing flame from soggy kindling with breath and willpower. Today's mission: impress merchants. You stir the fire with the same intensity someone else might reserve for swordplay. It sparks. It catches. The kitchen slowly fills with heat, smoke, and the unmistakable scent of something rotting in the corner. You vow to investigate after lunch service. Maybe. Peter arrives late, soaked and squelching. The courtyard's flooded. I lost a sandal. You glance at his one bare foot and decide not to ask. We have guests today, you remind him. He nods solemnly. Merchants. Papal merchants. He pales. Do they like cabbage? No one likes cabbage. That's why we disguise it. You set him to chopping turnips. A punishment, honestly, and begin your mental ingredient roll call. Still no barley, still no lentils. But you do have half a sack of rye flour, 1.5 apples, leftover stew, questionable, dried cherries from the spice shelf, you may have taken liberties, and the clove. Yes, the clove. It sits wrapped in waxcloth at the back of your apron pocket, like a secret weapon. Too small for a feast, too powerful for a weekday. You sniff it. Still strong, still holy. For now, it stays put. Instead, you focus on bread. You whip up a sweet rye dough, flour, honey, chopped apple, crushed dried cherries, and a touch of goat cheese for body. Peter helps knead, more or less in rhythm. You shape the dough into small round loaves, the kind that look artisan by accident. While they rise, you prep a simple vegetable stew, turnips, onions, nettles, and a bit of wine left over from the feast. It simmers with a reluctant gurgle, like it's not entirely sold on the idea of being food. The plan is modest. A humble soup, warm bread, and if things go poorly, you'll just talk about the Pope and hope they don't notice the taste. Peter returns from the cellar, triumphantly carrying a jar of pickled walnuts. You forgot those existed. You forgot pickling existed. You slice a few and lay them atop the loaves before baking. Now it's fancy. Now it's intentional. Historians still argue if monastic cooks truly innovated or simply got desperate with what was lying around. You're beginning to think they're the same thing. The loaves bake. The stew simmers. The rain continues its percussion routine on the roof. Then, as expected, the merchants arrive. 8 of them, cloaks soaked, boots muddy, attitudes suspiciously dry. One wears a red cap that screams accountant with delusions of grandeur. Another carries a ledger. You already dislike him. Brother Cellarer escorts them in, all hand gestures and smile lines, and makes exactly 0 effort to help you plate the meal. You serve the stew first. Hot, rich, and vaguely nourishing. Then the loaves. Sliced, warm, dotted with cherries and walnuts. Finally, water infused with mint and vinegar. No wine today. That would be too hospitable. The merchants eat in contemplative silence. They chew slowly. One taps his spoon. Another raises an eyebrow. You brace for criticism, and then it comes. One of them, bald, hawk nosed, definitely in charge, leans back and says, unexpected, earthy, reminds me of Florence. You blink. Florence? Peter whispers, what's a Florence? You shush him. Another merchant lifts a slice of bread and nods. You use cherries. Bold. You nod back. Not too proud. Just monk level humble. Then Redcap speaks. And no meat? No, you say. Today is a penitential day. He chews. Swallows. Shame? It's quite good. Would have gone well with salt pork. You resist the urge to throw a spoon. They finish the meal. Quiet murmurs. A few satisfied sighs. One of them pockets a slice of bread. You take that as a win. After they leave, you collapse on your stool. Peter starts cleaning. You reward him with half a walnut. He acts like it's a truffle. You pull out the clove. Look at it. Still waiting. Still safe. Maybe tomorrow. For now, the kitchen glows warm, the bread is gone, and you've survived another diplomatic culinary crisis without a single riot. You lean back, close your eyes, and listen to the rain. Somehow, it sounds like applause. The rain is gone. You wake up to sunlight, actual honest-to-God sunlight, slicing through the high kitchen window like a divine apology for the past 3 days of monastic swamp life. You stretch slowly, your joints clicking like poorly maintained door hinges, and allow yourself one long breath before facing the day. Then you remember it's bath day. Not for you, of course. Don't be silly. Bath day is for the monks, which means you're on laundry duty. And by laundry, we mean pots. Endless pots, sticky from every bean, stew, and cabbage abomination you've cooked this week. You trudge into the kitchen. The fire is still warm from last night. Thank you, Sister Ursula, who apparently napped on the hearth and looks deeply unimpressed when you nudge her aside. Peter enters, fresh-faced and humming the same hymn he hums every morning, off-key, off-rhythm, and oddly infectious. Did you sleep? He asks. I think so, you say. Or I blacked out. Hard to tell. He starts scrubbing bowls without complaint, which immediately makes you suspicious. What do you want? You ask. He pauses. Can I try making lunch? You stare. Just something small, he adds quickly. I found a recipe. Where? In Brother Thaddeus's herb book. You squint. That's not a cookbook. I know, but it mentioned stewed nettles with lemon balm and said pleasant in times of imbalance. I figured that's us. You sigh. Fine. But no experiments without supervision. He beams. Yes, Brother Cook. You assign him a pot, the nettles, and a blunt spoon. He gets to work with the focus of a monk translating ancient Greek, carefully, reverently, occasionally, muttering to himself. You, meanwhile, deal with the pantry. It's sparse. The fava beans are officially extinct. The onions are sprouting. The only usable item of substance is a block of hard cheese that requires both a chisel and a prayer to extract. You glance over. Peter is adding lemon balm and... Wait, is that mint? You rush over. Not mint. He jumps. Why not? Because it turns stew into toothpaste. Historians still argue whether monks were good herbalists or simply lucky with what didn't kill them. You suspect the truth lies in mint-based accidents. You rescue the pot, remove the offending sprigs, and drop in a few apple slices instead. Peter looks hurt. I thought we were being creative. We are, you say gently, just not suicidal. The stew simmers, now tolerable. You slice the cheese into thin edible-ish wafers, and toast them on flat bread over the coals. The result smells faintly of ambition and foot. Lunch is served nettles and apple stew, toasted cheese bread, and a side of "We're doing our best." The monks eat without comment. That's either a blessing or a curse. You'll find out later, depending on how many of them nap versus pray aggressively. After lunch, you sit on the bench outside the kitchen and stare at the herb garden. It's grown wild lately. The basil is winning. The thyme is losing. The sage is watching. Peter joins you with a wooden cup of tea, more leaf than water. He sips. Do you think we'll ever get barley again? Eventually. And the clove? You smile, still saving it. For when? You think for a moment. When someone cries at dinner, you say, from joy, not indigestion. He nods like this is the most reasonable thing anyone has ever said. Later, while cleaning the prep table, you find something strange. A note. Folded. Wax sealed with the monastery mark. You open it, expecting another guest list or spice restriction. Instead, it reads, to the cook. Word of your bread has reached the abbey in Avignon. A visitor may arrive soon. Prepare something worthy. You blink. Bread. Your bread. Reaching Avignon? Peter reads over your shoulder. Does that mean the Pope? You stare at him. If it is the Pope, I'm using the clove. He gasps. You tuck the note away. Something is coming. Maybe someone important. Maybe someone hungry. Either way, you feel it, like the kitchen is holding its breath. That night, you sit by the fire, cup in hand, Sister Ursula in your lap. Peter is polishing spoons again, by choice, which is deeply alarming. The wind outside has softened. The air smells like rosemary and smoke. You close your eyes and whisper to the hearth. Let them bring good wine. And not complain about the stew. You don't wake up the next morning. You are woken by the bell, the one no monk likes to hear, the unexpected arrival bell. The someone important just showed up without warning and wants food, lodging, and possibly absolution. Bell. You groan. You stretch. You curse very quietly into your sleeve. Then you rise. The kitchen is still dark. Sister Ursula is on your pillow. Again. You stumble into the light of the hearth which, blessedly, Peter has already rekindled. The boy is buzzing with nervous energy, flour on his nose and a wild gleam in his eyes. He's here, he whispers. Who? The one from the letter. You blink. The Pope? No, he says, as if slightly disappointed. But close. It's someone from Avignon. You freeze. The papal court, nestled far away in France, is famous for many things. Power, politics, impeccable embroidery, and unfortunately for you, standards. If anyone from Avignon is eating your food today, you'll need to move beyond turnip water and stale bread. You open the pantry and promptly close it again. The clove stirs in your pocket. It knows. You unwrap it. Slowly. Reverently. This is it. The moment it's been waiting for. One clove, one dish. Now the question is, what? You scan the shelves and gather what little you can. A handful of rye flour, a bit of honey, a few apples, one starting to look philosophical, a splash of wine from the bottom of the jug, and a single wrinkled lemon. You also find, forgotten under a bag of nettles, a small pouch of almonds, possibly ancient, possibly blessed. You begin crafting a honeyed apple tart on rye crust with toasted almonds and just a hint, a shaving of the clove. Not the whole thing. That would be reckless. You grind part of it into powder and mix it with the honey, letting the aroma bloom and wrap around your senses like a wool blanket woven by angels. Peter stands beside you, silent in awe. You're really doing it, he says, voice hushed. The clove. I am. Should I light a candle? No, but fetch the clean plates. Do we have those? No, but we have ones with less soot. As the tart bakes, gently, patiently, like it knows the stakes, you prepare a small stew to serve alongside. Simple but warm, lentils from Brother George, who finally relented after you traded him your better ladle. Leeks, garlic, and rosemary. No showiness, just comfort. Historians still argue whether monastery cooks saw themselves as servants of the body or the soul. Today you feel like both, and maybe a little like a wizard. The guest arrives mid-morning, tall, cloaked, dignified, and vaguely smug. He introduces himself as Brother Jean, humble envoy of Avignon. He has 3 books, 1 pen, and a look that says he's tasted things you can't pronounce. You set him in the guest chamber, serve him hot tea laced with lemon peel and honey. Then, when the tart is golden, fragrant, and cooling by the hearth, you plate it, just 1 slice, still steaming, and bring it in. He studies it, he sniffs, he lifts his fork, a fork, mind you, brought his own, cuts a bite, and tastes. You wait. He closes his eyes. Peter clutches your sleeve. Brother Jean swallows, then says, "This is familiar. Unexpectedly so." You blink. "Familiar?" He nods. "There is a sisterhood of nuns near Avignon. Once, they served me something quite like this. But it lacked courage. This one has spice, character, a memory. You say nothing. You just breathe. He eats the whole thing in silence, then asks for the recipe. You laugh. Just once. "We don't use recipes," you say. "We use instinct and leftovers." He grins. "My favorite kind." He thanks you, leaves a coin, on the table and returns to his horse, which Peter tries to pet and is promptly bitten by. After he leaves, you and Peter sit down and share the last slice of tart. The clove is gone now, used, transformed, but the warmth lingers, in the crust, in the hearth, in your chest. Peter leans back. "Do you think we'll ever get more?" "Cloves?" "Yeah." You smile. "If we do, I'm locking them in a jar, and you're not allowed near them." "Fair." The kitchen is quiet again. No guests, no drama, just the taste of honey, apple, almond, and something unnameable. A memory, baked. The clove is gone, and yet somehow you feel richer. Not in coin. Brother Jean's silver has already been taken by Brother Celler and probably used to buy more candles, or, ironically, less interesting spices, but in soul, in kitchen spirit, in culinary swagger, if monks were allowed that sort of thing. The following morning brings quiet. Not the ominous kind, the rare precious kind where nothing leaks, no one visits, and the monastery's main concern seems to be whether the cloister cat is pregnant again. You lean against the warm hearth, cup of weak tea in hand, and take a moment to simply exist. The light filters through the dusty window. The air smells faintly of ash, time, and victory. And then Peter sneezes directly into the flour bin. You turn slowly. He looks horrified. "I'll sift it," he says quickly. "You'll burn it," you say. And so another day begins. You manage to salvage most of the flour after discarding the top layer with surgical precision and begin prepping a basic dough. The pantry, now fully ravaged by guests and ambition, is down to its bare essentials. Root vegetables, a few herbs, a jar of goose fat that may or may not have predated the current abbot. You make a stew. A humble, robust mix of carrots, onions, turnips, and yesterday's leftover lentils. It simmers lazily while you bake a small batch of flatbread on hot stones. Peter proposes a new idea. Soup dumplings. You stare. "We fill the dough with stew," he explains, "then bake them, like edible pockets." Historians would call this heresy. You call it innovation. Fine, Yakidun, you say. But if it explodes in the oven, you're scrubbing the ceiling. He beams. The first batch explodes. Violently, the second holds golden little puffs of stew-filled bread, monastic miracles. You place them carefully in a basket lined with cloth and set them out for the midday meal. The monks approach, hesitant. They sniff, they poke, they chew. One of them, Brother Matthias, famously unflappable, actually raises an eyebrow. You use seasoning, he says slowly. Only a little, you reply. He nods once. Acceptable. You and Peter high-five behind a curtain. That afternoon, you finally get around to the root cellar. It's time. Winter's coming. And every monastery cook knows it's better to fight rats and ghosts in October than starve in February. You descend the stone steps, lantern in hand, and immediately sneeze from the smell. Earth, mildew, and vague betrayal. Down here lie the forgotten things. You find 3 sprouting potatoes, a sack of beets, a bucket of sad-looking parsnips, and 1 glorious, beautiful wheel of hard cheese you'd assumed stolen. Last Lent. You stagger back upstairs with your lute, triumphant. Peter is waiting. Is that cheese? You nod. Hidden behind the turnip barrel. He claps. It's a sign. Of mold, you chip off the green bits, shave the good parts, and tuck the rest into a cloth. Tonight's meal will be gratin, or something that can be passed off as such. Thin sliced root veg, cheese, a little goose fat, and whatever courage you have left. As it bakes, you and Peter clean the chimney flue. Again, he does most of the climbing. You supervise from the bottom with a broom and a deep sense of regret. Covered in soot, he asks, "Why do we keep doing this?" "Because otherwise," you say, "the smoke makes the bread taste like despair." "Oh," he sneezes. Again. Dinner is a hit. The monks eat in silence, punctuated by the occasional appreciative grunt. Brother Kellerer mutters, "Not bad," which is, frankly, an emotional outpouring by his standards. Afterwards, you sit by the fire, bowl in hand, watching the flame curl around the iron pot. No feast, no visitors. Just cheese and root vegetables and a faint hum of satisfaction in the air. Historians still argue what made monastic kitchens tick. Divine purpose? Rigorous planning? Luck? You're starting to think it was none of those. It was clove. 1 clove. A pinch of boldness. And a kitchen boy who believed soup dumplings were the future. It starts with a complaint. You're rinsing out the stew pot when Brother Ambrose corners you by the sink, which is, to be fair, just a bucket on a crate with a slight slope. "Brother Cook," he says, with the tone of someone about to not compliment you, "I must report that yesterday's bread was unusually textured." You pause, ladle midair. "Unusual how?" "Crunchy." You blink. "Crunchy isn't a texture." "It is," he says, "for apples, not for bread." You suppress a sigh. "Thank you, Brother Ambrose. I shall tell the flour." He nods solemnly. "Please do." He leaves. You ladle a bit harder than necessary. Historians still debate the politeness of monastic dining culture. Some argue it was serene and spiritual. Others, like you, believe it was one long, passive-aggressive culinary review. Peter overhears the exchange while dusting the spice shelf, which, let's be honest, is more cobweb than spice, and tries to comfort you. "I like the bread," he says. "You also like that turnip jelly. I have adventurous tastes. You plan today's meal with an invisible chip on your shoulder. If they want soft, you'll give them softer than sin. You soak what's left of the rye flour, mix in warm milk, honey, and a bit of mashed apple for moisture, then beat the dough with a spoon, until it sighs into submission. Meanwhile, Peter decides to try something new, which is your least favorite phrase, closely followed by unexpected guests, and Brother Cellerer has opinions. His idea: roasted parsnips with a sugar glaze. We don't have sugar, you remind him. We have that jar of syrup from last spring. You squint. The one with bees in it? He grins. Extra protein, you groan. Fine, but strain it. After an hour, you have soft bread rolls and something that smells like dessert, but probably isn't. You taste it. It's sweet, crunchy, and parsnippy. Against your better judgment, you approve. Lunch is a modest triumph. The rolls are pillowy. The monks seem confused, in a good way. Brother Ambrose even eats too, though he chews each bite like he suspects betrayal. But that's not the strange part. The strange part is what happens after. You're sweeping the kitchen floor when Brother Thaddeus approaches, looking alarmed. Brother Cook, he whispers. They're talking. You lower your broom. Who? The monks. I should hope so. No, talking, about the food. You freeze. That is not normal. What are they saying? He leans in. Some think you're hiding something. Hiding what? He looks around. Spices. You blink. Well, they're not wrong. That afternoon, word spreads. Monks begin loitering near the kitchen, offering to help stir things, asking questions like, what's that smell? Or, is this cinnamon? When you're literally boiling nettles. Even Brother Cellerer shows up and asks to inspect your storage jars. You hand him a pot of dried rosemary and watch him sniff it like he's solving a crime. Peter finds it hilarious. You find it exhausting. You end the day prepping for tomorrow's fast. Another round of fish stew. You have salted herring, still angry, a cabbage, 2 turnips, and one last wedge of stale bread that may double as a weapon. You chop slowly, methodically. The noise of the knife against the board keeps you grounded. Sister Ursula watches from her favorite spot near the oven, clearly judging your form. Peter hums again, this time on key. You hate how proud you are. That night, you slip a small note under the corner of the spice cabinet. We do not possess cinnamon? Stop asking. Love the kitchen. You sleep with the strange comfort that comes from soft bread, suspicious monks, and knowing that tomorrow someone will complain about the fish. And you're ready. You wake up to fish. Not a fish in your bed, though given the monastery's current plumbing situation, you wouldn't rule it out, but the smell of fish, salted, fermented, offended by its own existence. You sigh, you stretch, you whisper, here we go again. The herring, which you left soaking overnight, is still scowling at you from its bucket. You swear it squeaked when you walked in, as if trying to lodge a formal protest. Today is Friday, which means fasting. No meat, no dairy, just fish, vegetables, and the quiet ache of spiritual suffering disguised as nutrition. You begin by boiling water, which at this point is as natural as breathing. Peter arrives still half asleep, dragging his sandals like he's smuggling guilt. He sees the fish and stops short. Are they supposed to look like that? They're penitent. They look angry. Good, they'll fit in. You gut the fish, rinse them, mutter apologies to St. Peter, and drop them into the pot with onions, leeks, and cabbage. It immediately smells like regret and low tide. Peter stirs quietly. Then he asks, do you ever get tired of this? You pause. You mean cooking? No, of doing the same things, over and over. Like, do you ever wish we could make something wild? Like roasted pheasant with rosemary glaze and crushed walnuts? You snort. We don't even have walnuts. We have beet peels and opinions. He sighs. You both do. But the stew simmers. and the day marches on. Mid-morning, Brother Cellerer enters with another scroll. You brace for doom, but he actually smiles. Just a note of thanks, he says, handing it to you. It's from Brother Jean, the Avignon envoy, short and polite. Still thinking of the tart. May Benedict reward your kitchen. You stare at it. A compliment. In writing. In Latin, no less. Peter gasps. Are we famous? You roll your eyes. We're one tart famous, but you pin the letter to the pantry door anyway. Lunch arrives. You serve the fish stew in wooden bowls, a slice of rye bread alongside. The monks, perhaps softened by the scent of old herring and the memory of sweet rolls, eat without complaint. Brother Ambrose does raise his hand at one point and say, Is this the same fish from last week? You reply, Yes, but it's had time to reflect. He nods solemnly and eats it. Historians still debate whether fish days were about humility or simply about making monks appreciate Sunday feasts more. You think it's both. After lunch, Peter finds a lump of beeswax and tries to carve it into a ladle. You watch. You're going to stab yourself, you say. No, I won't. He immediately does. Just a nick. But still. You patch his thumb and assign him herb drying duty, which is a polite way of saying, sit in the sun and stay out of my kitchen. He settles in the cloister courtyard, surrounded by bundles of sage, thyme, and a suspicious sprig of something that might be poison ivy. You clean the pots. Again. And then something odd happens. A monk you don't recognize, new face, freshly tonsured, approaches the kitchen. Are you the cook? He asks. You brace. Yes. He hesitates. I was told you might have ginger? You blink. Who told you that? He glances around. People talk. You stare at him. We don't have ginger. He leans in. But you had clove. That was special. He nods as if understanding the secrets of the universe. If you ever get ginger, let me know. And then he leaves. You stand in the doorway, stunned. Peter returns, herb-stained and curious. Who was that? Apparently, you say slowly, we have a reputation. He grins. We're spice dealers now. God help us. That evening, you prepare a quiet supper. Toasted flatbread with a leek spread and warm cabbage salad. It's humble, comforting, monk core. You and Peter eat in the corner, by the hearth. Sister Ursula sits on the table, paw in the butter dish. No one dares remove her. You stare at the fire. You know, you murmur, we really should get more cloves. Peter nods. And cinnamon. And walnuts. And chickens that don't scream. You both laugh. The monastery's quiet, the kitchen is warm, and the scent of fish is finally gone. You lean back. Same again tomorrow? Peter smirks. Unless the Pope shows up. You sigh. Better save some beet peels, just in case. The next morning begins not with bells or sunlight, or even the sweet, soul-deep creak of your knees. It begins with Peter yelling, Brother Cook, it's gone. You jolt upright, hit your head on the underside of the table. Why were you sleeping under the table? Right, last night's draft. And rush to the kitchen. What's gone? You bark, still half in a dream. The cheese? You freeze. No? Yes. You blink at him. Not the cheese? He nods gravely. The cheese. You run to the larder. Gone. The wheel you unearthed from the root cellar 2 days ago. The one you'd carved into like it was a sacred relic. The one that gave yesterday's stew a reason to exist. Vanished. Poof. In its place, a very small note written in suspiciously neat handwriting. For God's work. Will return soon. No name, no explanation. You slump to the floor. Peter kneels beside you. Could it be Divine intervention? It could be Brother Bernard. That man would baptize himself in gravy if no one was looking. You sigh, deeply. The kind of sigh monks write psalms about. No cheese means no planned gratin for today's Sabbath Eve meal. It means going back to gulp turnips. You haul yourself up and start chopping, fueled by rage and old bread. Historians still argue whether monastic theft was common or simply underreported. You'd argue it's common, underreported, and always involves cheese. By noon, you've cobbled together something passable: roasted turnips with thyme and a soup made from cabbage, apple, and bitterness. Peter tries to cheer you up by carving little fish shapes into the bread loaves. You don't have the heart to tell him they look like worms. Lunch is edible. No applause, no complaints, no suspicious coughing. Just the sound of 30 monks politely pretending they weren't expecting cheese. After the meal, while Peter scrapes bowls and hums an off brand hymn about mercy, you plot. You're going to find that cheese. You begin your investigation with Brother Bernard. Naturally, you find him in the scriptorium, carefully copying a Latin manuscript with the smug serenity of a man who has definitely eaten stolen cheese. Brother Bernard, you say, trying to sound casual, have you seen a wheel of hard cheese? He blinks. Describe it. Round, yellow, divine. He shrugs. Could be anyone's. You narrow your eyes. Could be God's? He looks away. I was hungry and working late. I left a note. You groan. That cheese was for everyone. He claps a hand on your shoulder. Then I thank everyone. You don't scream. You're proud of that. Back in the kitchen, Peter is experimenting with honey-roasted root chips. Crispy, he says proudly, offering you one. You crunch. It's good. Surprisingly good. Accident, he admits. You're a culinary menace, you reply. Supper approaches. You put together a spread from odds and ends, the root chips, a nettle and barley soup. Brother George came through with something, and a few slices of dried pear you'd forgotten existed. It's fine. It's enough. You sit by the fire after, Peter curled up with a stolen hymn book, Sister Ursula asleep on a sack of flour. The kitchen glows gold. The air smells of thyme and faintly burned optimism. Then a knock. You frown. No one knocks at the kitchen door. You open it. A small monk stands there, drenched, holding the cheese wheel. He speaks quickly. I took it for the novices. One had a cold. Another was crying. I made a broth. You stare, speechless. I brought the rest, he adds, handing you half the wheel. It's smaller, rougher. Smells vaguely of herbs. You accept it like a returning champion. Did they like it? He smiles. One asked for seconds. Another asked what flavor it was. You chuckle. That's high praise. He bows and disappears into the mist. You turn back to Peter, raise the cheese like a relic. He gasps. The prodigal wheel. You laugh. Long, deep, tired. The kitchen is quiet again. Tomorrow is Sunday. A feast day, and you've got half a cheese wheel, an apprentice who believes in crispy turnip slices, and a cat who just stole your spot by the hearth. Life, as always, continues. Sunday dawns with the kind of calm that always makes you suspicious. No bells, no rain, no one shouting that the chickens have escaped again, or that Brother Matthias is stuck in the latrine. Long story, don't ask. Just a cool breeze curling in through the kitchen window and the soft crackle of the hearth from where Peter fell asleep, mid-peeling. You nudge him with your toe. He blinks awake and says, Is it Tuesday? It's Sunday. Oh no. Oh yes. You both spring into motion. Feast day meals aren't just bigger, They're watching. You closer bigger. The monks eat slower. They taste more. They remember. Whatever you cook today will be quoted during scripture reading for the next month, or weaponized as a metaphor during confession. You begin with the resurrected cheese, half a wheel of holy hope. It smells better today, aged just enough to seem intentional. You shave off slices, melt it slowly with herbs and crushed walnuts. Yes, actual walnuts, a gift from the Behem novices as apology. And you layer that over toasted barley bread. Peter is in charge of roasting apples with honey and thyme. You give him one instruction: don't set anything on fire this time. He nods solemnly. He immediately sets his robe on fire, just a little. You douse him with dishwater and carry on. Historians still debate whether monks viewed feasting as celebration or sacred trial. You know better. It's both. Every feast day meal is a test of your wit, your pantry, and your ability to not cry into the gravy. You make a thick vegetable stew laced with rosemary and a suspiciously generous pour of wine. You dice carrots into flower shapes. You sprinkle herbs like you're hosting a Renaissance cooking show. You even, God forgive you, garnish. The bread toasts, the apples roast, the cheese melts, the kitchen smells like forgiveness. The bell rings. Lunch begins. The monks file in cleaner than usual, robes straightened, faces expectant. Brother Cellarer nods at you like a reluctant father at a school play. Brother Bernard mouths, cheese, and you nod. He almost bows. You serve. First, the barley toast with cheese and herbs. One monk mutters, divine intervention. Another closes his eyes. Next, the wine stew, rich, deep, honest. Then, the roasted apples, tender, sweet, fragrant. Peter beams as each monk takes one. You watch from the corner. You always do, ready to dash back if someone coughs suspiciously or frowns at a turnip. But today, silence. Then a slow wave of contentment. Spoons clinking. Quiet sighs. Someone even hums. A risky move during meals, but no one complains. Brother Ambrose raises a slice of barley bread and says, crunchy, but appropriately so. You almost faint. Afterwards, a few monks linger. They thank you. One compliments the stew. Brother Cellarer says, you're improving. Peter almost cries. You pat his shoulder. We'll mess it up again soon. He laughs. But not today. The kitchen, once chaos, is now quiet. You sweep slowly. You sit by the hearth. Sister Ursula licks an empty bowl and pretends she earned it. Peter curls on the bench beside you, murmuring plans for future dishes that definitely involve figs and some very experimental lentil layering. You close your eyes, and for the first time in weeks, you don't dream of cabbages. Just bread, warm, buttered, and gone too soon. The kitchen dims as evening slips quietly into the monastery halls. Outside, the stone walls glow with the last amber hues of sunlight. Inside, the fire is low, the pots are clean, and the air smells faintly of thyme, wood smoke, and something sweet that lingers, perhaps from the roasted apples, perhaps just from the memory of being full. You sit alone now in the warm hush, with your feet propped near the hearth and your robe smelling like toast and a little victory. Sister Ursula purrs beside you, soft and smug. Peter has finally gone to sleep, curled up with a wooden spoon like it's a teddy bear. There's a silence here that isn't empty. It's gentle, like a warm quilt of all the meals you survived, all the jokes whispered over steaming pots, and all the quiet nods of approval you never thought you'd earn. You think of the clove, long gone, but it doesn't matter. What mattered was the moment, the magic it carried, and the hands that shared it. Your eyes begin to close. The kitchen fades, but the warmth stays. You drift off, with the taste of bread in your mind, and a sense, soft, certain, that tomorrow will bring more turnips, more chaos, and maybe even another miracle. But for now, just rest. Sleep well, little cook. You've done enough.